My dear children of class 12, you please open page number 63. And in the last class, I explained attitude of people towards the disabled, what Derry meant to say. Now, Derry says that his family often talks about him downstairs when he's not there. And they are worried to think what is going to happen to him when they are gone and how he will get on in this world. So their parents are always worried about him. Up to this, you have learnt in page number 62. Now today I'll start from page number 63. Now Mr. Lamb, Lord, boy, you have got 2 arms, 2 legs and eyes and ears. You have got a tongue and a brain. You will get on the way you want, like all the rest. And if you choose and set your mind to it, you could get on better than all the rest. Now Lamb encourages him that he has got 2 arms, legs, eyes, ears, a tongue and a brain. So Lamb remarks that people are not the same just by what they look like. So everything is the same, yet everything is different. Everything has its own entity. And Derry wonders how Lamb knows all that about. Lamb remarks that he does so by watching, listening and thinking. Derry says that he wants big house and a big lawn. So here Derry says, how? Mr. Lamb, same way as I do. Derry, do you have any friends? Mr. Lamb, hundreds. Derry, but you live by yourself in that house. It's a big house too. Mr. Lamb, friends everywhere. People come in. Everybody knows me. The gate's always open. They come and sit here. And in front of the fire in winter, kids come for the apples and pears and for toffee. And I make toffee with honey. Anybody comes, so have you. Derry, but I am not a friend. Mr. Lamb, suddenly you are. So far as I am concerned, what have you done to make me think you are not? Derry, you don't know me. You don't know where I come from or even what my name is. Mr. Lamb, why should that signify? Do I have to write all your particulars down and put them in a filing box before you can be a friend? Derry, I suppose not. No, Mr. Lamb, you could tell me your name if you chose, and not if you didn't. Derry, Derry, only it's Derek, but I hate that. So underline this portion also, Derek. The full form of Derry is Derek. If I'm your friend, you don't have to be mine. I choose that. Now here, Mr. Lamb's conception of friend is totally different from Derry. Lamb asks him to stay with him and proposes Derry to be a friend. And Derry asks how they can be friends only in one meeting. But Lamb tells him that he can come there at any time, even if he is out. Earlier, Lamb had asked him to help him in getting ripe crab apples. Now, Derry thinks to help him. He tells Lamb that with one leg he can fall off a ladder and die. So Lamb requests him for help if he can. Now Derry offers to help him, but he wants to inform his mother where he is since she will be worried. So Lamb doubts if he would come back. So Derry assures him to return, but Lamb says to himself that people never come back, though they say that they will come back. So here the solitariness of Lamb is also highlighted here. And Derry's attitude towards Lamb is totally changed. Derry started loving Mr. Lamb. So he said that Mr. Lamb, doesn't mean they're enemies either, does it, Derry? No, they're just nothing, people, that's all. So here the conception of friends is totally changed in Derry by Mr. Lamb. Mr. Lamb wants to say that friends do not mean that every day you will have to meet with them. There's a reciprocity of feeling, reciprocity of thought. Okay, and they are not enemies either. So all are friends. So universal friendship, the feeling of universal friendship is infused by Mr. Lamb to Dairy. Now Dairy, no, they are just nothing people, that's all. Mr. Lamb, people are never just nothing. Never. Dairy. There are some people I hate. Now Dairy starts telling that there are some people he hates. Mr. Lamb, that would do you more harm than any bottle of acid. Acid only burns your face. Dairy, only? Mr. Lamb, like a bomb only blew up my leg. Those worse things can happen. You can burn yourself away inside. So here you see, Dairy tells Mr. Lamb that he had heard his parents talk that it would be difficult for him to get on in this world with a face like this after they died. Mr. Lamb says that he had arms, legs, eyes, ears, tongue, and a brain. And he could get on the way he wanted to, like everyone. And he was determined he could get on better than all the rest. And Dairy wants to know if Mr. Lamb had friends. Mr. Lamb feels that he had hundreds of them, and they were everywhere. His gate was always open to welcome people. People came in and sat in front of the fire in winter. Kids came for the apples and pears and for toffee that he made with honey. Anybody could walk in just as Dairy had. So Dairy is surprised as they barely knew each other. But to Mr. Lamb, all that is insignificant. Dairy introduces himself. He says that if he would not visit him again, then he would be nobody, like a person on the street. Mr. Lamb clarifies that people are never just nothing. Now, Dairy hated some people, but Mr. Lamb says that hatred does a lot of harm. Acid only burned Dairy's face. A bomb blew up Mr. Lamb's leg alone, but hating would burn their insides. Now, you see, always Mr. Lamb infused positivity in Dairy. Dairy, after I'd come home, one person said he would have been better off stopping in there in the hospital. He'd be better off with others like himself. She thinks blind people only ought to be with other blind people and idiot boys with idiot boys. Then Mr. Lamb said, and people with no legs altogether? Dairy, that's right. Mr. Lamb, what kind of a world would that be? Dairy, at least there would be nobody to stare at you because you weren't like them. Mr. Lamb, so you think you are just the same as all the other people with burnt faces, just by what you look like? Ah, everything's different. Everything's the same, but everything is different itself. Dairy, how do you make all that out? Mr. Lamb, watching, listening, thinking. That means by means of perception. Dairy, I'd like a place like this, a garden. I'd like a house with no curtains. Mr. Lamb, the gate's always open. Dairy, but this isn't mine. Mr. Lamb, everything yours if you want it. What's mine is anybody's. Dairy, so I could come here again. Even if you were out, I could come here. Mr. Lamb, certainly you might find others here, of course. Oh. Mr. Lamb, well, that needn't stop you. You needn't mind. Dairy, it would stop them. They would mind me. When they saw me here, they look at my face and run. Now, here you see, Dairy has heard that people are better off with others like themselves. Blind people ought to be with other blind people, and idiot boys with other idiot boys. Actually, Dairy is totally immature, so he feels in that way. Dairy feels this because when all the people had the same defects, they would not be stared at. But Mr. Lamb disagrees. He says that people with the same deformity would also be different. It is incorrect to judge people by what they looked. One had to watch, listen, and think to notice the difference. So Mr. Lamb emphasizes on true perception. Now Dairy liked Mr. Lamb's house with a garden and no curtains. Mr. Lamb says that gate was always open for everybody. Mr. Lamb, even in his absence, there would be others there and invites him to visit. And Dairy was utterly surprised at this. He feels others would look at his face and run. But Mr. Lamb said that he would have to take that risk. Mr. Lamb says the kids called him Lemmy Lamb and yet came into the garden. They were not afraid of him just as he was out of them. Now Mr. Lamb said they might not. In page 65. You would have to take the risk. So would they, Dairy. No, you would. You might have me and lose all your other friends because nobody wants to stay near me if they can help it. Mr. Lamb, I've not moved. Dairy, no. Mr. Lamb, when I go down the street, the kids shout Lemmy Lamb, but they still come into the garden, into my house. It's a game. They're not afraid of me. Why should they be? Because I'm not afraid of them. That's why not Dairy. Did you get your leg blown off in the war? Mr. Lamb, certainly. Dairy, how will you climb on a ladder and get the crab apples down then? Mr. Lamb, oh, there's a lot of things I've learned to do and plenty of time for it. Years, I take it steady. Now here you see, Dairy wants to know how would he climb on a ladder. And before that, Mr. Lamb says the kids called him Lemmy Lamb and yet came into the garden. They were not afraid of him just as he was not of them. So Dairy wants to know how would he climb on a ladder and get the crab apples down. So Dairy develops a sort of concern for Mr. Lamb. And Mr. Lamb says that he had learned to do a lot of things. He was not afraid of falling and breaking the neck or of dying. So up to this today, children. In the next video, the rest of the portion will be followed. Just mark it in your book up to Mr. Lamb in the middle portion, page number 65. Oh, there's a lot of things I've learned to do and plenty of time for it. Years, I take it steady. Up to this today. Thank you, children.